All right, man. Where are you at? That's a hotel room, or is that a fake hotel room?
Yeah. No, it's I had to make the bed for this. No,
Okay,
we're
good.
a little family vacation in Palm Springs, so
Oh, right on.
had to step out and
Awesome.
do this with you.
Aw, I feel special now.
You are special. That's why I'm doing it.
Well, like we were talking about off camera, apparently the algorithms are starting to favor me. So I fully
I
intend on
know.
taking advantage. All right,
I'm
everybody
changing
who's
my iPhone contact for you called Made Man.
made man, love it, love it. All right, so for those of you that are tuning in, this is a part of our deep dive series here at Pivot. What we're trying to solve for is the age-old question of which job management platform is best for my business. Here with me today, I have Stephen from Capabuild, who I would venture to guess many folks out there have not heard of you. So why don't you start by just telling us, hey, who is Capabuild? Like if I didn't know you, and I'm fortunately I do know you pretty well, but if I didn't know you, who are you? What's Capabuild? What are you doing? Why are you here? What's up?
Yeah, so I think probably the best way to start that is kind of just I know out there might be diving a little earlier ahead, but how I came to this industry, and then kind of
Okay.
like that was the origin for like how we as a company came to be. So my background, I've been in anything commercial real estate related. I was an owner. I was like an investor, not my money, someone else's. I was a very
Okay.
lowly analyst and running properties. But and then I was a service provider, selling services to commercial buildings, whether it was an occupant of a commercial building or the owner themselves. Helping with like project management tools or finding space, leasing space, etc. But I had in a prior life built a successful company that's still going on today. It digitized the whole leasing and office leasing process along with construction. So I saw the power of like taking what was a very paper driven experience and digitizing it, and how much like uh, autonomy it gave back to the actual service provider, the broker in this instance. And we built that as like a service plus tech platform at a company called Ray's Commercial Real Estate. And it was amazing what happens when you gave a lot of autonomy and tooling back and put that in the hands of the service provider. You gave them so much more
Mhm.
time to provide a better service because they were spending so much less time doing the table stake stuff of like compiling surveys and producing reporting and documentation, et cetera, like that. So, 2020 hit. I personally had kind of a hard time selling office space amidst a time when everyone was working remote. And I started, my passion really dwindled because it just felt like I was selling life insurance policies to geriatrics. They
Oh,
just didn't need it,
yeah.
and so I started poking around trying to find like what I wanted to do next. And something I'd incurred throughout the 12 years I'd spent in the commercial real estate space, it was unavoidable, was property damage. We'd be working on a project. The company needed to be in there, whether it was Google or Shell Oil, they needed to be in a space by a certain date. And it's construction, lo and behold, something would
Mhm.
go wrong. Pipe would burst. One time I saw a lift trolley clip a 4-inch water sprinkler in a
Yep.
lobby, and it just dumped water for 30 minutes.
Oh, those are my
And
favorite.
for those of you, exactly. I mean, yeah, now in restoration, those are amazing projects.
Yep. Yep.
But I was the jerk in the first go that was like, what is this? Just mop it up, dry it up. And it
Yeah.
wasn't until I kind of really got in the weeds with everybody that I saw like, oh wow, there is so much more involved. And so I started looking at like the tooling available for folks. And really what we found was that these business owners their processes 9 times out of 10 were entirely predicated by their quote partners on
Mhm.
the projects, which are mortgage companies, insurance carriers, et cetera, because they wanted information in such a way. And kind of caught in the middle was the customer, the policyholder, whether in my instance it was a commercial owner, apartment tenant, or, in many instances, a homeowner. And so, our whole thesis for the business was, let's build field first. So front lines back to the back office. So we started with a mobile app first, then started building more and more into web. But really wanted to focus on giving as much tooling as possible to the service provider in the field and allow them to dictate their own processes and not try to accommodate for the thousands of different data points that each insurance carrier wants you to capture amidst a process. If you adhere to the standard of care and do the right thing, here's our clean reporting for that. So we want to build a tool that, our tagline is, we empower restorers to be exceptional operators. It's not become, but to be. It's like they already are. It's like we're just facilitating tooling that allows them to bring that forth a lot more. So obviously that was a long-winded answer to your question, but it's a little bit of me and who we are. We want to give power back to the restoration contractor in controlling their process, controlling their pricing, and then ultimately they get to figure out what their standard of service is to a customer. And by giving them control, we think that authenticity is the best form of sales. The more authentic you are to who you are as a business and who you are as a person, your sales, you're going to find your people, you're going to find your customers. So it's like, little flowery, but that's our vision.
So, one with one hat on, you sound a little anti-TPA, dare I say. Tell me about and like clarify the position, right? Because I know I just threw a fast pitch hardball at you. Clarify the position, and then tell me why you've taken that position.
Yeah, it's really not that we're anti-TPA or anti-insurance, because, we came in, the first conversations, I had before even starting the business, I called, I don't know, close to 100 different businesses across the country and was like, what problems do you have? And then I did the inverse. I called adjusters. I called anyone I could think of from an insurance capacity that did property and casualty insurance, just to understand. And you really just have two people that want to do it two separate ways. Contractors are amazingly reactive. They can't be proactive. And if they are, you're a Hall of Famer, with your client base. Insurance carriers, they are data companies, and they just need it in such a way that they can analyze it. And the amount of data flowing into insurance carriers, and in good years in our industry, the amount of dollars flowing out, they need to make sure that this information is organized in such a way that they can understand it. They can better, update their actuarial tables. So, at first, I will fully admit, I was like, yeah, this is a grand conspiracy. Insurance carriers are trying to, belittle and squash the contractor. But then you talk to insurance carriers, they're like, we don't want to spend time on this. We want to process this quickly. We want to fulfill our fiduciary responsibility, because the moment a claim was filed, we've lost money. There's no like mitigating, $1,000, $2,000, even $10,000. We need to get out of this. But they want the data in such a way that it makes sense to them, because the operational expense of converting it is a huge way. And so, because the carriers are the ones cutting the checks, they're the ones ultimately determining, it's like, hey, I'm paying. I want to see how this information, even though the homeowner's the one paying their policy, they make the decision, the check is still coming from the insurance carrier. So they want to make sure the information is coming to them in a way that is easy for them to digest and analyze. The problem is, and this is, where the perception of the anti-TPA, anti-insurance perspective comes. If you think about the thousands upon thousands of contractors that a carrier has to deal with and the different processes, it's totally in their best interest to say, do it one way, because we don't want to have to convert these things. But what we're seeing, at Capabuild in kind of a growing trend in the industry is insurance premiums are hitting a ceiling, just what insurance carriers can actually charge for their services. And so what you're seeing in states like Florida, or even in our home state of California, carriers are reducing coverages overall. So to us, as perennial optimists, we see this as a glass half full moment. The insurance carrier is contributing less financially, and it's a growing trend. They're contributing less financially to this claims process, which means the contractor, the pendulum should start to shift back their direction of, well, we need to define our own processes, and we need to define the way that we conduct our work, so it's seamless, efficient, organized, etc. And so the contractors that jump ahead of that curve and that trend are going to be the ones that receive completely outsized benefit instead of the ones who can play defense against the ever-changing landscape of insurance carrier demands. So I think it's a concept of two warring interests, and insurance carriers are just have a lot more leverage in this transaction, where a contractor at the end of the day is just trying to do a good job and provide good service. So we want to level the playing field, I guess, is probably the more appropriate and politically advantageous way to say it.
Okay. So how does Capabuild do that?
Yeah, we try to make the process as simple as possible. You got to do 5 things every day when you get onto a job. One thing we spend a lot of time with when we're onboarding customers is standard operating procedures, and it's oftentimes pretty eye-opening to see companies absolute experts in their trade. You put them in front of any scenario, they can diagnose it, chop it up. But when you ask them like, hey, what's the top 5 things you need to do, top 10 things, it's not that they're saying, oh, I can think of 20. They're like, I don't even know where to start. It all depends on the project. But if you're training a team, it's quite difficult, especially when you're bringing, everyone talks about how difficult it is to hire new people. Well, this is an extremely technical trade, and bringing someone in and not being able to say, what are the 5 things I should do every day? And so the things that we at Capabuild believe are that case is photo documentation, readings, which we say like material, atmospheric, those are readings. Mm-hmm. You've got daily formic flows. So you're saying like, what's your daily log, hazard assessments, toolbox talks, like things like that, like the things you're logging every single day. And then the 5th one being communicating with customers. If you do that interested parties, adjusters, subs, customers, etc., you do those 5 things. So it's photos, like written documentation through forms, readings, client communications. We kind of break the readings into 2 with material and atmospheric. But if you're doing those 5 things for every affected section of the project, there's a pretty strong likelihood you're going to get paid what you're owed. And so we try to break those things down as simply as possible so that folks are able to move their project quickly.
Got it. Okay. And I think for the average rank and file restorer, that makes a lot of sense. What would you say makes Capabuild unique?
I think we, kind of contradict myself a bit, on the prior thing about TPAs. Is like we really try to allow, rather than accommodating to the uniqueness of all of those disparate, workflows or data points, like first notice of loss, or when did it's just like little things. Is like, if you were to run a business, you're like, when was the loss discovered? Not when did the loss occur. It's like, oh, I discovered it today, but it happened maybe 3 weeks ago. Like little things like that are important, but in assessing a project. But like a typical contractor left to their own devices probably wouldn't track those dates. They would just use that as an assessment of like, okay, is there mold present? Because the water's been sitting for a while. We really accomplish this by allowing contractors, this is tying into maybe another concept of like, who's a great customer for ourselves. It's somebody who's already defined their systems. This is how we, with our people, our environment, our customer base, our partner subset of subs, TPAs, adjusters, etc., referral partners. This is how we run our process. We've detailed it. We know what we're doing. Now we're assessing what software system will fit this process. And we have a very malleable system that allows you to create, capture what you need to in your process, but do so with like very simple functionality. So, we live by a motto at Capabuild that it's very easy to make something complicated. It's very hard to make something simple, because in making something simple, it doesn't mean that you get to shirk effectiveness. So you have to be simple and effective. That's very hard. Making something complex, we can just add another field to something and make it, you need that? Sure, add it here. But eventually you get to this thing where it's like, it's a tangled mess of wires. Like, where am I going to find this information?
Mm-hmm. So how does it, give me an example of how your platform takes something and makes it simple, right? You said, look, we
got it. Okay. Yeah.
We try and make sure we don't make things complicated. Okay, so tell me something that's usually complicated that Capabuild makes simple.
Finding information. We leverage a timeline experience. So, our user interface mirrors a lot of the kind of tools and programs that people are using every day, social media being one of them. We make it a very simple tool so that you can go through and you can see timestamps of when something occurred. So on larger projects, you want to see the activity of various locations and you want to see so in a timeline, perspective. Um, that's a huge everyday value that we bring. Amongst all that, and it's becoming commonplace across the industry. We have this concept of instant sketching. We were one of the first platforms that I don't want to overstate there, but I think we were one of the first platforms in the industry to bring lidar sketching into the project. But candidly, that's something we get for free. That's a tool that is available through Apple hardware, and we don't see the need to charge incrementally for that process because that's something that we're not paying an incremental usage for, but we chew everything we can to try and squeeze as much out of that hardware to capture information. So getting sketching in instantaneously allows you to get off the job a heck of a lot faster. So you can start to produce your moisture report. You're not waiting around for a hand sketch or measurements. So those are areas I think we try to bring like immediate real time value. And then, the easy stuff of like digitizing the entire process, making it collaborative. One huge thing that we spend a bunch of time, and it's maybe not as evident to our existing user base, is offline capacity. If you're losing information when you're capturing stuff in the field, it's not effective to use it digitally. That's why people have split processes across paper and software. So, we've got a lot. Sorry, it's hard to do the kind of where do you add value, because it's usually our response there when customers ask that is, where do you need it? And then we'll point you how we do it.
Got it. So you touched on what makes a good Capabuild customer is a customer who shows up, knows their process, knows how they're going to execute. And then it is simply your ability to take that process and plug it into the flow and function of Capabuild. Who doesn't?
When and where to use a tool.
Yeah. Like, who doesn't make a good customer in the fact that these are the folks that we've tried to onboard and they just struggle no matter what. They just struggle. And, they should probably find a different platform that more suits their needs.
Yeah. I think it's the the folks that haven't taken the red pill and kind of gotten out of the matrix of like, I need to address that system over here and that system over here. So it's the folks that are like, don't just by the very nature of like where they receive money, don't necessarily have entire control or enforce that in their workflows. So it's this is an 80% solution. And we try to be, because at the end of the day, this is a partnership, right? I'm not like, we sold you, ha ha ha, we tricked you. And now, I'll see you in another year when we come up for renewal. It's like, this is an ongoing relationship. So we try to make sure that we're adding as much mutual value as you're giving to us by paying for it. So it's just the folks that like are still not as tight on their process, or more importantly, the ones that are transitioning out. Say they were doing predominantly TPA work and they're like, you know what, we really want to start to make an investment into, commercial self-pay, however you want to call it, but where the customer is actually the one making the purchasing decision with their own checkbook. The ones that are transitioning in between those can tend to be rough customers. It's more the ones that are like, we're doing all this in paper, we're doing all this on Excel because we tried every other software under the sun and it's not working for us. So that's kind of the both yin and yang of who works for us and who doesn't. It's, you got to know who you are. Talked about authenticity beforehand.
Yeah. And then, so of those customers who are finding success, what specific features are they leveraging about the platform to kind of double down or use as a force multiplier in their business? Like, where do you see customers that you look at and you're like, man, not only do they get it, but they're generating more profit. Their customers are getting served better, however they want to measure that. Like, who are the ones that are just really screaming ahead?
I think it's the ones, fundamentally, it's just the digitization of the documentation process. It's, you're not splitting workflows of like some paper or some digital experience. So it's the ones that really lean in. It's like we've got the obvious stuff of like you do a LiDAR sketch, you use that, team communicates, starts using the moisture mapping, comes back day over day, the points are already fixated. That's like low hanging fruit. I think that's why a lot of people, when they see it, they're like, oh wow, this is amazing. But the ones that we see the most value are the ones that are using our timeline communication experience, and then also our automated time and material tracking. So, a lot of what we're doing by digitizing this process is digitizing your daily log, and then we extract the information from that data daily log from each individual on site and auto populate that into your running invoice or your running estimate. So then you can have your initial estimate. You're doing day over day or up to the minute expense tracking based on some, these formic flows that when people are entering information in, we're auto extracting the financial information for that. So, do I need to produce a change order? Do I need to call the customer and say, hey, we're actually ahead of schedule? But it's getting both the typical documentation, the text-based stuff, the photos, the moisture reports, but then tying that all together with the financial. Those are the folks that we see like, man, we had a 3-day bill cycle. Like we finished the project in Capabuild and 3 days later we had a check. So it's the folks that really lean in on the digital side of the equation and use the time and material and the real-time communication, which is comparable to like Slack or Teams, where you can at tag folks, but it keeps it all central to one project.
Interesting. Okay. That makes sense. Restoration's a dynamic place. I'm sure that you've hung out here for a couple of years now and you've seen some of the challenges. Why do you choose to stay? It's one of my favorite questions to ask industry people.
Yeah. I mean, you know this about me when we met, whatever, a couple of years ago, but my family's background, my uncles, mom, grandparents, they ran a very small sheet metal factory in the Bay Area, which was like metal fabrication. They built housing units for radios. And, unfortunately, a couple of years ago, we had to shut down the family business largely because it was entirely paper driven. And, so to kind of high level, it's a two-part answer. When I meet with these restoration owners, I see how much they care, similar to my grandpa, similar to my uncle. And yet they're just, they care so much about their craft and care so much about servicing their customer, but they just haven't been given the right attention or tools to kind of bring their business and help them scale into kind of this new era. So the persona person we're meeting with and helping every single day reminds me of my family, and that, that has like an intrinsic value. And it's pretty cool. A lot of our engineers and people have a very similar experience, family members in the blue collar background. And it's just, helping. We have this saying in our company, it's called help the helpers. Restoration contractors are helping their customers and going to the ends of the earth to do these things, but who's helping them? And then, on the flip side of it, I have this like, anti-disestablishmentarianist approach of like, how do we level the playing field? It's like insurance carriers, like, I get it. If I was in their shoes too, I would like, hey, I want this information this way. Oh, you're willing to give it to me that way? Great. I'll wait a little longer so I don't have to convert it myself. But, I really love the ability. It's like level the playing field and let's see what, how the athletes perform, not who's got the biggest payroll, to fund how they want to do things. So yeah, it's two-part. It's helping the person and then also, having an impact in the industry that you can kind of level the playing field.
Awesome. What questions do you have for me?
Oof. What are you, given your exposure and Pivot Partners, what are you seeing as kind of what are people asking for? What are your customers asking for by way of like property? Like what's the thing like, hey, Anthony, we have this problem, but we need this type of solution. And what's the solution people are seeking for right now?
So it's the bookends of projects, right? Very rarely do we get questions on how do I execute and do a good job in the field, right? Our current membership, like, they don't have any questions or any doubts with that at all. It's always, how can I generate my own work? How can I get my own leads in the door? And then how can I collect that money better, faster, stronger, right?
Mm-hmm.
And because you're so process-based, you'll understand this, that to answer any one of those questions, you have to talk about how you do the work, and you have to analyze how you do the work and the process by which the work gets executed, because garbage in, garbage out, right? And so, but we see a lot of, folks in the restoration space that have survived on their ability to prioritize and prioritize alone, and built massively successful businesses absent process entirely. And so that's really where I have a lot of joy here at Pivot, is we get the ability to take great operators who know their businesses very well and help them develop process so they can grow and scale and build towards the next level. And I like, when I zoom out and I look at it on a macro level, one of my personal missions here is to make the industry a place that I'm proud of. That, and my litmus test is like, do I want my daughters to get involved in the industry? And right now my answer is no. Yeah. But I think if we can, help business owners create process, kind of shift the paradigm of control, so to speak, that you've been referencing, then it starts to become an industry that I would feel good about my daughters being a part of, and I would want them to be a part of it.
I like it. As a girl dad myself, 9 weeks in or 10 weeks in now, I can take that. It's a growing approach. I can feel as like building a business where you want your child to come into it. Absolutely.
And I think that, like my wife and I talk, and like, I don't know, we feel like legacy is important. I can't tell you why.
Absolutely.
But legacy feels important. Like, and it's also equally as important for our kids to go out and do their own thing. But it'd be nice if they had a family business to get involved in. I feel like that's quintessential Americana. Like, just fire up some Bruce Springsteen and start hammering away in the family business, right? That's what we all want.
Oh, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I think owning a business is about as American as it gets. So I think it's like, that's what you own a business, you're adding value to an economy. Not that you're not doing it as an employee, but like, you're out there. My dad describes it as like being in a boat with no oar and no map, and you can't see any land. And so you've got to figure out a way to build an engine to take you where you need to go. And you don't know how it's going to happen, but you just got to put a lot of effort into that problem, and eventually it works out.
And a lot of the times you don't know how you did it until you're done. And then you look backwards, you're like, holy shit, that's how we did that. That's pretty awesome.
And you would say, I don't know how if I could ever do that again, but I got here. So
yeah, it's your ability to prioritize, right? That's kind of what it boils down
to. Totally.
Any closing thoughts for our friends out there in social media land?
I mean, I'd be remiss to say, if you are someone who has defined your process and hasn't found your software, we're open for business. So please reach out. We'd be happy to give you a demo and see how we can help you. Beyond that, I think that I'm really excited to see these growing trends of how folks are, taking pride in capturing their own data. I mean, the amount of people we're talking to now that are building into Power BI dashboards, or leveraging Chat GPT and building their own GPT agent for internal training. Like, that's an initiative towards like really trying to add more value to your organization and by proxy to your customer. So, I'm really excited to see how people are taking control back of their own process and trying to leverage that to go out and, drive their own business, as opposed to relying on your partners to drive and grow your business. So,
yeah, awesome, man. Well, cool. Thanks for taking some time.
Well, thanks for the time.
Yeah.
And
then look forward to doing the deep dive with you here in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll talk to you later. Thank you.
All right. Bye.